day everyone. For this video we will be discussing about writing fiction, particularly the different elements of fiction. But first, let us have a definition of what fiction is. Fiction is make-believe or invented stories. Pretty much these are stories that are based on the imagination and creativity of the writer. Also, fiction may be in forms of short stories, fables, vignettes, plays, novellas, or novels. Now, it is also worth noting that although writers may base a character on people that they have met in real life, the characters and the experiences that the character faces in a story are not real. Hence, it is fictitious based on fiction. Now, at this point, we are going to focus on the different elements of fiction. When writing fiction, a writer must be familiar with the following elements. We start off with, of course, the characters, the setting, the plot, the conflict, the point of view, and of course, the theme. Let us start with the characters. The characters in the story are considered as the stars in a story, as the events in a story revolve around the characters, in a way that their actions in the story would lead to other events. Also, the characters may be persons, animals, or even extraordinary beings, which would of course be dependent on the genre or theme of the story being written. Characters may also be classified according to roles. Remember that each particular character in a story has a role or purpose to play. And lastly, it requires research for effective writing. Writing about a character from a different culture requires accurate writing in order to avoid misrepresentation. Now at this point we are going to talk about the different types of characters, starting with the protagonist and the antagonist. The protagonist is the main character of a story, in a way that majority of the plot sequences includes him or her. Of course, being the protagonist, his or her main objective is to resolve the conflict presented in the story. The antagonist, on the other hand, opposes the protagonist. Also, the antagonist tends to be hostile in nature. Now, while the protagonist aims to solve the conflict that is presented, the antagonist usually is the cause of the conflict in the story, and of course aims to stop the protagonist in resolving the conflict. One of the best examples of a protagonist in modern literature is Harry Potter, who has encountered different challenges and struggles in order to find ways to stop his antagonist, who is Lord Voldemort, whose mission is to kill Harry Potter in order to gain immortality and become all-powerful. Now at this point, let's focus on another type of character, which would be the round character and the flat character. The round character is someone who plays an important role in the story. One of the characteristics of round characters is that they are complex, dimensional, and well-developed. Also, in a story, round characters change as a result of undergoing a life-changing experience. On the other hand, a flat character is someone who has no important role in the story. Pretty much while the round character is complex, dimensional, and well-developed, a flat character usually has only one or two characteristics, and of course, tends to be a stock or a stereotypical character. One of the best examples of a round character is Prince Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. At the beginning of the series, his mission was to capture the Avatar in order to earn his father's trust and gain back his honor. As the series progresses, he struggles to determine his true self and his purpose. At the end of the series, he realizes his true purpose and was able to help the Avatar in stopping Fire Lord Ozai from destroying the world. Now, from the same series, an example of a flat character is the Combustion Man, as he is seen to be someone who is sort of the common villain that aims to stop the team Avatar from accomplishing their mission. At the end, he only lasted for simply 1 or 2 episodes, and after that, he was gone. Now let's go back to the different types of characters. We have the foil character and stock character. A foil character is considered as the opposite of a certain character in a way that he or she exhibits the exact opposite of the characteristics of a particular character, while the stock character is usual characters in the story. These are your typical characters that do not undergo change and of course seen to be cliché characters. An example of a foil character would be Draco Malfoy, whose characteristics and personality would be the opposite of Harry Potter. Where Harry Potter is considered to be courageous and independent, Draco Malfoy is seen to exhibit cowardly traits from time to time and heavily relies on his friends to do his bidding. While an example of a stock character would be the typical Death Eater, who is simply there for the purpose of functioning as a henchman in the story. Now at this point we're going to focus on another element, which would be the setting. The setting shows where and when the story takes place. It may be based on an actual or imaginary location, such as here in the Philippines or probably somewhere in another country, or pretty much in an imaginary location such as in Neverland. It may also happen in an actual or imaginary time period. It may happen in the present, sometime in the past, or even sometime in the future. Now it is worth noting that both the location and the time period are important, as these help determine the genre or context of the story. Knowing about when the story happens and where it happens would give the readers an idea of what they're going to expect in the story. The setting also helps set the tone and the mood of the story, as well as help reveal certain details about a certain character. Now typically, when writing a setting, the setting would usually include the following. First, a description of the immediate surroundings, the time of day when the story is happening, the type of weather or atmosphere, the time period when it happened, and of course, the geographical location. All these elements would help contribute in giving the readers an idea of the setting, where the story is happening, what is happening, and how it's going to contribute in the story itself. Next, we talk about the plot. The plot refers to the order of events in a story. It is worth noting that the events in a plot follow a logical sequence. As such, we have the Freytag's diagram, which is used to determine the parts of a story plot. The parts of a story plot would start with the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. The exposition introduces characters and settings as well as the tone of the story. Pretty much it gives the readers an idea of what the story would be about. Also, it includes events that introduce the conflict, which leads to complications that would lead to events in the rising action. The rising action would refer to events that the characters encounter. Each event leads to further complications that would lead to the climactic event. The climax is the most important or most intense part of the story, as this is considered to be the turning point in the plot. After the climax, we have the falling action, which refers to events that unfold after the climax. One of the characteristics of the falling action is that it elicits an emotional response from the readers. After everything has been settled, we now proceed to the resolution. The resolution provides the closure to the story. This signals that the conflict has been fully resolved. Now at this point we will talk about conflict. Conflict refers to the struggle between the characters in a story. It is worth noting that there are different types of story conflicts. We start with character versus character and character versus nature. Character versus character depicts the struggle between characters in a story. It is usually the conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist, while character versus nature depicts the struggle encountered by characters when facing a natural calamity or forces of nature. An example of character versus character would be the struggle or the fight between Fire Lord Ozai and Avatar Aang, while an example of character versus nature would be the film 2012. Other types of story conflicts include character versus society or culture, and character versus technology. Character versus society or culture indicates a struggle between a character and a group of people who share the same culture or beliefs, while character versus technology indicates the struggle between a character and technological advancements. An example of character versus society or culture would be The Hunger Games, wherein Katniss Everdeen is struggling to fight a society which is led by corrupt and unjust leaders. While an example of character versus technology would be I, Robot, wherein the main character, played by Will Smith, is struggling to fight a group of robot projects that have gone awry. And lastly, we have character versus God or the supernatural, and character versus self. Character versus God or the supernatural indicates a struggle between a character and a supernatural being, while character versus self indicates a struggle between a character and himself or herself. It is also worth noting that while the other conflicts that have been presented earlier are considered to be external conflicts, character versus self is considered as an internal conflict. An example of character versus God or the supernatural would be the movie Wrath of the Titans, wherein the main character Perseus is struggling to fight different kinds of supernatural beings from gods to titans. While an example of character versus self would be the character of Kronk in The Emperor's New Groove. Usually, there would be a moment where he would struggle with himself in trying to make a decision, just like this example here. Next, we have the point of view, which indicates how the story is seen or narrated from a certain viewpoint. Remember that there are two major types of points of view. We have the first-person point of view and the third-person point of view. In the first-person point of view, the story is narrated from the perspective of one of the characters. Usually, it is the main character that narrates the story in this kind of point of view. The first-person point of view helps bring the readers closer to the story as they are able to read the story as if they were the character. While the third-person point of view, the story is narrated from the perspective of an observer. As such, it is safe to say that the narrator is not part of the story. Furthermore, the third-person point of view can be subdivided into limited and omniscient. In the third-person limited, the narrator is limited to being able to see in one character's thoughts, while in the third-person omniscient, the narrator has the unlimited ability to be in various characters' thoughts and to be in various areas or various locations and various events in the story. And lastly, we have the theme, which is the underlying truth or reality conveyed in a story. The theme is considered to be the central focus of the story as it tells what the story is about. Also, the theme may be universal, meaning it can be anything that the readers can understand or relate to. Some examples of the common themes would include love, coming of age, circle of life, greed, prejudice, good versus evil, family and friends, or success. There are different kinds of themes. Pretty much a theme would be anything that the writer would be interested, anything that could be relatable for the readers, and anything that can be understood easily by the readers. In a nutshell, when writing fiction, it is imperative that a writer would rely on his creativity and imagination in order to come up with meaningful stories. Also, conducting research is necessary in writing fiction in order to ensure that there would be accurate representations of certain cultures or characters in a story. And lastly, knowing the different elements of fiction will allow aspiring writers to be more effective writers of fiction, as these will make the stories they write more relatable and valuable.